It was December 6th, 1958. Christmas was just around the corner and the Martin family of Portland, Oregon was getting into that Christmas spirit. Kenneth Martin, the patriarch of the family, put on his Santa suit and went to a Christmas party, handing out candy canes and having a great time. The following day, the Martins were planning on going for their Sunday drive. When they left, Kenneth's Santa costume was still out and his wife, Barbara, had left a load of laundry in the machine. 3 of their 4 children came with them. Barbie, a 14-year-old freshman at the local high school, Virginia, 13 years old, and Sue, 11. Their oldest child and only son, Donald, was in the United States Navy and was stationed in New York at the time. The Martin family stopped at least twice on their drive. A gas station owner saw the family buy 5 gallons of gas from his store in Cascade Locks, about 40 miles away from their home. After they left the station, they drove east. A waitress at the Paradise Snack Bar in Hood River reported having served the Martins at the restaurant. Reports also came from numerous motorists of the family being in an unspecified location on the north bank of the Columbia River in Washington state at dusk. This is the last time the Martin family was known to be alive. On December 9th, Kenneth failed to show up to work and Barbie was marked absent from her morning classes. Later that evening, after nobody had heard so much as a peep from the Martin family, Kenneth's boss reported them missing. The police arrived and investigated the Martin residence at around 11 p.m. They found Kenneth's Santa costume, Barbara's load of unfinished laundry, and some dishes on the drying rack. Nothing seemed to be out of place except for the absence of the family. There were no signs of a struggle, nothing was missing, and the Martins' bank accounts still had a lot of money in them, suggesting that the family had not intentionally disappeared. Searches were soon undertaken along the route that the Martin family had traveled that fateful day. A stolen white Chevrolet was found abandoned in Cascade Locks, but the police dismissed it initially on account of it not being Kenneth's vehicle. Near the abandoned car, the police also found a Colt Commander handgun, which had been dumped in some bushes. It was covered in dried blood. It was given to the police but was never processed for evidence. The gun's serial number was traced to a department store, and the authorities subsequently discovered that it had been one of several items that Donald Martin, the son who was in the Navy, had been accused of stealing while working for the store. Numerous leads were produced for this case in the weeks after it had initially happened. The day before the Martin family had been reported missing, a man named Roy Light had been arrested with another unnamed man for having stolen the white Chevrolet. A waiter at the same restaurant the Martins had eaten at reported that he had seen Light in the restaurant at the same time as the Martins, and he had also left the restaurant at the same time as the family. This, of course, raised much suspicion against Roy Light, but he was never charged with the Martin family's disappearance. A later tip came from the owner of an orchard east of Portland who said that he witnessed a man and woman gathering greenery in a canyon on December 7th. He also said that he saw a flock of buzzards flying in that direction the following week. The canyon was searched, but nothing was found. On December 28th, a woman's glove was found near the site of the stolen Chevrolet. The Martins' extended family stated that it was the kind of glove Barbara would wear, but nobody could prove that she actually owned it. There were also several alleged sightings of the Martins' car, but none of them were ever confirmed to be legitimate. Eventually, a volunteer searcher found a set of tire tracks leading off of a cliff in Wasco County, Oregon. Paint chips were found near the scene and they were sent to the FBI for analysis. As it turns out, these chips matched the paint that had been used on the make and model of the Martins' car. Sonar technology was employed to search the lake under this cliff, but nothing was ever found. 3 months after the discovery of the tire tracks, a drilling rig near the same area reported that they got hooked on something heavy in the water. They were unable to pull it to the surface, but whatever it had been became dislodged during the incident. The next day, a fisherman and his wife reported seeing 2 corpses floating downstream near Cascade Locks. The 2 bodies turned out to be Susan and Virginia, both of whom were positively identified via their dental records. The bodies were both examined, and one of the technicians indicated what they believed were bullet holes in the girls' heads. However, the medical examiner's report stated that there were no such injuries and the cause of death was drowning. Susan's clothing also had traces of metal, including aluminum. The spot where the drill dislodged the bodies was opposite of an aluminum smelting plant. It was suspected that the drilling rig had accidentally discovered the Martins' car and unintentionally opened one of the doors, which was how the 2 bodies escaped. However, the subsequent searches for the car came up empty-handed. So, what really happened to the Martin family? There are several theories, of course, but we still don't know for certain. One theory is that Kenneth accidentally drove the car over the cliff and the family subsequently drowned, a tragic accident. A second theory, however, maintains foul play. Many people believe that the tire tracks found at the cliff indicate that the car was pushed over the edge, not driven. This could mean that whoever was responsible for the family's demise either killed them before disposing of the bodies or did both at the same time. The unfortunate truth is that we will most likely never know the answer for sure. Christopher Carlton Tompkins was born on December 28, 1981, to his mother Ann Mackenzie in Columbus, Georgia. By all accounts, Chris was a loving and devoted son who always did his best to make his mother proud and happy. At 20 years old, Chris was working for a surveyor's company in Columbus. He reportedly enjoyed his job and his mother even babysat for his boss. All seemed to be going very well. On January 25, 2002, Chris arrived at work and got into a co-worker's car to go to a job site in Ellerslie, Georgia, a small town in Harris County. This town is apparently very rural and has a small population with much wooded area, but it's also not the middle of nowhere. The site where Chris's crew was working that day had houses scattered around it, but was remote enough that nobody would bother them. The crew took their lunch break around 1 p.m. and got back to work half an hour later. They worked in a line, each person being about 50 feet away from the next person. Chris and a coworker talked for a while, but then the coworker had to focus on a project. Apparently, when he looked back at Chris's position, he was nowhere to be seen. The tools Chris had been using were on the ground, but there were no other signs of him. They called his name but got no response. It seemed he had simply vanished. The crew spent several hours walking around the surrounding area, looking and calling for their missing coworker. One of them called his wife to inform her of what had happened. They attempted to call the police as well, but they were told that they had to wait 24 hours before they could do anything, seeing as Chris was an adult. Anne was also eventually notified about her son's disappearance, and she arrived at the worksite as soon as she could. The group continued to search for any sign of Chris, and they ended up making a discovery. One of Chris's work boots was hanging off the edge of a barbed wire fence near the worksite. They found some loose change and a piece of torn blue fabric that Anne thought was either from Chris's pants or flannel shirt. It is unknown why Chris's coworkers didn't find this before the family arrived. The police arrived to the scene the next day with search dogs to find Chris's scent, but the dogs found nothing. The authorities stated that they believed Chris had left of his own volition. Anne did not buy into that theory, however. Chris was a family man who put his loved ones first. It would have been completely out of his character to up and leave without so much as notifying any of his family members. However, nobody could find any signs of a struggle. Eventually, Anne's suspicions turned on Chris's coworkers. They were the only people known to have been in the immediate area where Chris vanished from. It also seemed a little unrealistic that Chris's coworkers wouldn't have noticed him walking away from the site or even heard the loose change fall out of his pockets as he climbed over the fence. Furthermore, despite having apparently searched the area after the disappearance, his coworkers had not found the boot or change until his family arrived. However, there has never been any hard evidence that Chris's coworkers were involved with his disappearance. 6 months after the initial event, a farmer who lived less than a mile from the worksite stumbled across the second work boot. The first had been found hanging from a barbed wire fence, the second in a marshy area by a farmer. Law enforcement determined that they had to take another look at the case. Unfortunately, no other leads have ever been uncovered. Skeletal remains found in the area were proven to belong to a different person, and Chris has never been found, alive or dead. There are several theories behind this case, but none of them have substantial evidence. The authorities' initial theory that Chris simply walked away to start a new life is highly unlikely. He didn't have any mode of transportation aside from walking. The town he was in had no public transportation of any kind. He was also reportedly happy and content with his life at the time. The second, more likely theory is that Chris was forced to disappear. Like I said before, there has been much suspicion aimed at his coworkers. While most of them were cooperative with the police, one of them hired a lawyer almost immediately and refused to cooperate. Hiring a lawyer isn't necessarily suspicious, of course. In fact, I would argue that it's a good idea in many situations involving law enforcement, but the immediacy with which he hired the lawyer has raised some eyebrows. One of the co-workers also went to prison shortly after the disappearance. The charge was not connected to Chris's case in any way, but it was reportedly a violent crime, which could potentially show a pattern. All of this is mere speculation, however. The unfortunate truth is that we will likely never know what happened to Chris for certain. We can only hope that we will get some answers and justice at some point.